Good evening, everybody. I'm sure many people know me by now. My name is Kim Tiha, and I'm the director of the Pennington Public Library. I am very excited for the topic this evening, which is storytelling in the graphic novel and the oral tradition. This is an interactive presentation, so we welcome a lot of conversation in the chat window. And if you have any comments to any of Joanne's questions, feel free to also raise your hand and we will unmute you. And we have, as I mentioned earlier, our panelists. We have 4 panelists: Maya, Kathleen, Diane. Actually, that's 5 panelists because Diane is with David, and also Holly. So thank you very much for our panelists for volunteering to have your screens on tonight. This program, if you don't already know, it's part of our 2022 NEA Big Read, which encourages the Pennington community to read the same book and to participate in a wide variety of events. And our chosen book is The Best We Could Do. This is an intimate and poignant graphic novel portraying one family's journey from war-torn Vietnam. The NEA Big Read is a program of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest. And let's proceed with a little bit of background about our presenter tonight. The Reverend Joanne Epply-Schmidt is Associate Rector of Trinity Episcopal Church in Princeton. Her work there focuses on pastoral care, youth and family, justice, and anti-racism ministries. Joanne began her professional storytelling career in the late 1990s, serving as a teaching artist and storyteller in the juvenile justice system and in Trenton City Schools. She has performed and taught the art of storytelling in workshops and programs in schools, colleges, seminaries, churches, and retreat centers in the US and in Canada. And this is Joanne's second time participating in a Pennington Big Read, and we feel so honored to have her. Joanne, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It is delightful to be with everyone this evening, and it is so nice to see some familiar names in the participant list and on the screen. So hello, everyone. And to people I don't know, well, I'm glad to know you now. Shall I just dive right in, then, Kim?
Yes, please do.
All right. So I have a question for you all initially, which I may or may not be able to get the answer to. And that is, has everyone read the book? I don't know if there's a way to find out if people, yes, no, if a hand can come up and I could know. We try to prepare both for those of you who have read the book and those of you who have not perhaps read the book. And I'm coming to you live from my upstairs study, which was once upon a time my son's bedroom, which is why it features the partially painted wall behind me and my collection of books set up by my son, who has a degree in film, who helped set up the lighting so that we could have a professional looking setup here. And it's delightful to be with you this evening. I really was touched to be asked to participate again, and I found the book to be really an unusual undertaking. And when I was asked to present, it took me a little bit of a time to think, let's see, how shall I go about this? And that's when it dawned on me that I think there really is a connection between the notion of a graphic memoir. I have it, I'm looking to my side because I have it right here, and the art of storytelling. So let me start. I have some prepared notes I do want to share that will keep us on track. I'm going to say some things. I'm going to tell a piece of story. We're going to look at some of the panels from the book. I'm going to ask you for some questions, for some interaction, some responses, and that will kind of be the pattern through to the end of the evening. And then we'll have whatever questions and answers there may be time for, just to set that up. But I found that The Best We Could Do tells a very riveting story with just a few words and arresting art. The writing is specific and spare, as you noticed. The drawings are dramatic and deft, only a little bit of color, but a lot of strength to them, and page by page, it evokes in us as readers as much empathy and understanding as pages and pages of text could do. I also think it is a very, very brave way to create a memoir, because the author leaves a lot of space for us to imagine our way and interpret our way into the story that she does not control with a lot of words on the page. It is not a controlled written narrative. but we are invited into her experience. We're not told what to think. We are invited to discover and to understand alongside her as she discovers and understands her parents, herself, her history. We're invited to piece together with her, literally, a lived experience. Storytelling in the oral tradition, telling a story, telling a tale tradition, also relies on carefully chosen words, crafted, not too many, and unspoken, unnarrated experience of place and time and emotion and the embodiment of lived experience. A told story is, in a way, like a drawing. You see more than you hear, but you experience a wholeness. I think there's a commonality between the graphic memoir and oral storytelling in that regard. So I have come to think it's a very brave way to tell a story. There's an openness for a listener of a story told, or the reader of the graphic novel or the graphic memoir, that will engage us personally in the experienced much more than pages and pages of text can do. Because the graphic memoir or a story told both require and evoke something in us, something of us, sometimes before we even notice that that has happened. So perhaps in the next hour, we can come to understand a little bit more and more and become consciously aware of what happens within ourselves when we encounter a book like The Best We Could Do, which is written with spare language and evocative pictures, or when we hear a story told. If we can take this time to become aware that we interpret, we see, we make meaning intuitively and creatively very quickly, rightly or wrongly, with a story told in both of these ways. So as an example, as an exercise, let me tell you the shortest of stories. This is the shortest story I know, and it is simply called The Chinese Axe. It goes this way. There was once a farmer who had a single tool. It was his axe. And every day he walked into the field carrying his axe to work. And every day as he walked to the field, he walked past a certain boy. And every day he looked at that boy, and that boy looked like a thief, and walked like a thief, and talked like a thief. And every day when he came back from work, he passed that same boy that looked like a thief, and walked like a thief, and talked like a thief. One day, he rose to go out to the field to work, and when he went, he realized he did not have his axe, but he knew what had happened to it. And so he walked by that boy who looked like a thief, and walked like a thief, and talked like a thief, that he knew had his axe. But he went to the field anyway, and when he got to the field, he bent down to work with his bare hands, and there, under a leaf, just where he had left it the day before, was his axe. And that day, when he returned from work, he walked past that very same boy who looked and walked and talked just like any other child. So there's my shortest of stories. A one that I hope you remember and will find useful and will tell in whatever circumstance you find useful sometime. But I would like to ask you, what did you, this is the part where you have to interact with me. I mean, now you know what happened in the story because I told you, but you know more about that story than just what I said, more than just the words. You know, because before you even knew it, you visualized, you imagined your way deeper into the story, just like we would do with a graphic novel, is my proposal. So first, let me ask you this, and reply however we can do this, unmute or whatever. What did you see me do that helped tell the story? Not just hear me say, but what did you see me do that helped tell the story?
Repetition. That helped.
Repetition. Mm-hmm.
You moved your eyes and your body
Mm-hmm.
And your hands.
and your hands.
Mm-hmm. Gestures I see in the chat, yes.
I don't know if this is related, but the fact that you said it was the shortest story, it gave me this image already, or this impression of how it would play out, even though it was such a just that one descriptor, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's meant to be brief and crisp. As Holly said, repetition. It is said in storytelling that repetition are like the ribs of a basket. When you weave a basket, it's like the ribs that will hold everything else in it. When it comes to gesture, what kind of gesture did you notice, or movement of body? You did not move a lot when you were telling the story, simple movements. So we could concentrate on what, I can't get the rest of the chat there. Hands and head, yes. The axe.
The axe, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The goal is the simplicity, so that the rest of the time, it's yours. It's yours to take personally. So let me ask you to do this. Just pause for a moment and think of a moment in that story, just a simple moment, and ask yourself, do you know what time of day it is? Can you feel the air? Is there sunshine on your skin if you're in that story? What does the man look like? What is the man wearing? What does the boy look like? Where is the boy exactly when he passes him? What does that axe look like? And the field, what's in the field? And I'm just wondering if anyone would share, if you have an instant reaction or a thought, is there anything that you can smell? Something growing or rain coming? What of your five senses, if you just think for a moment, anything's fair. Any answer is fair.
My sense was when he was going to the field, it was morning, it was bright, the weather was always terrific. And when he was coming home, the sun was coming down and it was cooler. And that just came. I really didn't even think of it. It was like, those are the facts. That's the way it was.
That's right. There you are. That's exactly it. Did anyone else have that same experience where, now that Diane mentions it, you realize you had added in a lot?
I don't know why, but I pictured the whole story as if it were an illustrated children's book.
Maybe that's your craft. That's, well, that's also indicative of what happens in that, you bring yourself to the story and the story welcomes you personally in. The boy sitting on the side of the road. Yes, it's very clear to me. To me, the boy is sitting in a doorway on a granite block. I don't know why, but I just decided that's the case.
And he's poor because the man is judging him. So.
Right, the man is judging. Yeah.
And to me, he was standing. When you just said sitting, I said, no, that's not right. He was standing. And he was in a field. He wasn't in a doorway. So interesting.
Yeah, so I think, so I mean, that's my point. There is so much that we bring to it before we even notice, to the point that you can tell me that, you're right and I'm wrong. And who knows, the story doesn't actually say. So any answer is in fact right. It's just a few words, a few gestures, and we fill in the blank according to our own experiences and imaginations of what we bring into this. And it's important, I think, to be aware of this when we're dealing with things as consequential as someone telling us about their life. Kim, could we go to the first illustration, the first panel?
Yes, let me share that with everybody.
Yes, thank you. Can we get that full screen? There we go. Thank you. Now, everyone, I would just invite everyone to read the page. It's the first page of the book. So there are a few words there that are contained in boxes, very contained. So that's information that's just squared in. There's a frame around the picture. There's a specific angle of her body. There's a title, so we know what's happening. So that's what we see, and that's what we are told. But already there's more that you know about this panel than you have thought about consciously. So my question again is, what do you really see? And what do you hear? It's a woman in labor. What do you feel, or what does she feel, or what do you feel is the atmosphere that she's in, the air, the temperature? She's lying down on something. What might it be? What is she feeling? What can you smell? What would you taste if you were her in labor in that moment? And so I would ask that the clenched fist means pain. Yes, please. And please share, panelists, and in the chat. I would like to know. Loneliness jumps out. I'm curious, Ophelia, if you can say more about how you see that loneliness. Waves coming in, 12-foot waves. Yeah. Yeah. And Ma has left. The stark lines of the black and the white. Yeah. Vulnerable, fear, knows her Ma has left. I am wondering, can anybody smell the picture? Abandoned and trapped, yeah. For me, it calls up sort of a hospital smell. It's hot and humid. Okay, yeah. I look at the orangish paint on her, and I don't know if it's just me, but I sort of see an upside down outline of Vietnam on her. And that I'm just entirely, it just comes to mind. I'm just kind of making it up. But I'm wondering, think about this. Can you call up your other senses in this or call up what senses you weren't aware of, but you might be thinking? I sort of smell a room, and what does her back feel like? What is she lying on? For me, she's lying on something cold and metal. I don't know why. She could be lying on a floor. It smells of blood. Clenched fist, yeah.
Joanne, I think also the perspective is so personal.
Mm-hmm.
You don't normally see a perspective such as this unless you're looking down at yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that adds to the loneliness because of the fact that you don't see anyone else but yourself, basically.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, thirsty hospital smell, stale smelling. Yes. And some of that emptiness is that we don't see her head, we don't see anyone else, but we know that she is looking out into that blank space. And let me just also note that, right, probably nurses there. So we're starting to imagine more into the moment. You see how much you know without thinking about it? It just kind of comes. And you look out into that blank space and it's an unknown. It's a real unknown. The baby's not born. It's a real unknown. It's a very vulnerable picture. And she's very brave to be telling a very vulnerable story. And let me also note, though, that there is a frame around it. This panel has a black line that contains it. So I mentioned that because we'll come back to that by the end of the evening. So we can take down that panel now if you want to. See, I think pages and pages of text can tell you and describe for you specifically what she's touching, tasting, feeling, smelling, what we would want to experience. And those of us who've been in that situation would be able to bring our own experience into it, whether we are people who have given birth, or we've been near someone who's given birth, or we've ever heard about somebody or something or anyone, a pet giving birth. And there'd be words on a page can direct your attention, and words on a page are an art in and of themselves that sometimes, it's the point to notice that art of writing. But in those graphic panels and in the oral storytelling, it's put back in our own hands and hearts and minds to be the meaning makers. We are the recipient of a gift that's being given to us in very brief and basic form for us to be the hearers and the seers. And it is very vulnerable because, like the story I just told you about the Chinese axe, you can be right about what you see, or you can be wrong. It could be the boy is a thief, or he is any other boy. You are in a suspended state of waiting for the next set of images to give you information that are not there in the text itself. And I find it interesting that we read into something, we live into something so quickly that sometimes we do not notice it, though I think the goal is to notice it. One time I was telling a story called The Magic Garden of the Poor. And let me stand up again. It's a wonderful story. I'm not going to tell the whole thing, but there is a point in the story where there's a garden for the poor and the rich are not allowed in because there is a great wall that builds itself up around the garden, and the great iron gates click shut, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 locks click and close out the rich. And when the rich come, they come up to the wall and try to reach over, they're zapped away and they fall to the ground. Well, the story goes on. It's a great story. It takes 20 minutes to tell, so another time. I told this story, and when the story was done, we're talking about the story, my husband was there. And he said, when you talked about the wall, I could see a stone wall building itself up and filigree iron gates, and they locked with big brass locks and stuff. I could see that so clearly, but what does it really look like? And I found that so interesting because I thought, it looks like whatever you want it to look like. I didn't tell you what it looks like. Anything you bring to that is the right answer. But I like that anecdote because it says how quickly and convincingly and absolutely we see what we see. And we can also be aware at the very same moment that it is, in fact, an interpretation that's specific to ourselves. It's a way to get conscious how quickly we imagine into something, things that are our experience, as the picture of her in labor. We bring our own experience. We don't know what the room smells like unless we have smelled a smell like that sometime. And that's what brings us more closely to her in her story, or to the story of an oral teller. So I think it's particularly important to be developing the skill of noticing that we unconsciously fill in the blanks creatively and wonderfully, because we are dealing, in this book at least, with someone's personal story, which is a matter of extreme consequence that we might interpret accurately, that she would like us to have an accurate understanding of one another, and we might, and we might not. But in a story, just as in a memoir, we have a responsibility to notice what we are bringing to the story. I would like to take as an example the image of rice. It comes up in this story. Can we go to the second panel to share, please? There we go. And if you can all see that whole page and read the page, read the text if you choose. Notice the pictures. I'll give you a moment there. Do you notice that the squares are tightly contained? They're all the same size. There's information in the square boxes. There's conversation in the word balloons, the word bubbles, whatever. And then there's that place in the lower left that, we need out of focus, okay. Is there a way to focus it more, Kim? I don't know.
Because it is a scanned image,
Mm-hmm.
however you scanned it is how it appears.
It appears, okay.
But
all
you know
right.
what I can do is let me zoom into each panel for everyone. How about
Okay.
that? Would that help?
That would be great.
Okay, so give me one moment. I hope this helps. So these are the top two panels.
Mm-hmm.
I will scroll down to the next two.
Mm-hmm. And you can certainly see the tension and, you know, the pushing in on her with the dress and the pulling away, and then the distance between them. There's so much said in the gesture. There we are. Okay. And then we could just hold on that lower left. Oh no, white rice. Again, a double word balloon. And the look on the mother's face. Again, with what comes to you immediately? What do you hear? What do you see? What do you feel? What do you smell? What can you taste? If you're in the picture or in your own experience, what are some perceptions you have that you're just noticing now of that kitchen space just then? A lot of tension in the room, yes.
Well, Mom's the breadwinner, and they don't have a good relationship because I never read the book, but she's trying to make her a daughter that she doesn't want to be, and that's symbolized by the dress.
Mm-hmm.
And that would take a lot of pages to write.
That's right, it would, but you can see it quickly, right? And you can feel it. And as someone mentioned, yes, it's a tight space, it's cramped. Right there when she lifts the lid to the rice. Can anybody smell that?
I think that's very interesting because as someone who loves white rice, and especially jasmine rice, I feel like I would have smelled it much earlier, but perhaps because she wasn't a rice fan, it didn't occur to her until she lifted that lid.
Mm-hmm. But that's very interesting, and that's very important, because if rice is, you know, essential to you, you're ahead of her, and so you have a different opinion of her because you've already smelled it before you got in the room.
Yeah, for me, it's personal in that it's looks like a child born in the United States, two different, and one person who's an immigrant,
Mm-hmm.
and how they have a really hard time bridging the gap between them.
Mhm,
in the old world and the new world. It's very personal for me.
mhm,
So, and I can't seem to find a way to bridge that gap.
mhm, mhm. I wonder if anybody notices ambient noises. What does that tight cramped kitchen sound like? There's a few words, but there's other stuff. What else might we hear in that panel? What comes to my mind is I hear the hiss of maybe the steam in rice and the clank of the pot. Maybe there's a paper bag or another bag in the back with other things might have gone clunk when it was put down on the table. And one of the pieces of information we're getting there, of course, is that the culture clash. It as I interpret it, and I could be completely wrong, but as I see it, is that the daughter is in American culture, and the received information in American culture is that in modern North American culture, white rice is not nutritious. You're supposed to have some vegetables in it. So this is not valued as much as it might have been. There was maybe more value in the offer of it than in the reception. We can take down that panel, I guess, and come back to gallery. There we go. So she's trying to piece her life together. We're trying to piece her life together. And, form follows function. We have these panels that are in pieces and pieces and pieces. And it's early on, but obviously that rice is important. But the image is just left hanging there, unresolved, unexplained. But we've stepped into the kitchen. It's a case of the mother making decisions for the daughter. Yes, indeed. Very practical, hands-on decisions.
I just see that when she said, "Oh no, white rice again," I didn't see her saying that very loud or saying it to communicate to her mother. I felt it was almost like a sigh. And her mother's listening because she hears some babbling going on in the background and not quite audible.
Right.
So I didn't even see it as an effort to communicate. It was just, how many times have we been through this?
Yeah. So, right. So you're feeling the frustration, and none of that is said. It's all conveyed by the images. And you're bringing this. You're bringing that awareness to what's there. Someone didn't need to tell you because you know already, and it pulls from one's own experience. So, the daughter, she's got an image in her mind of what the rice is and what it means to her that may or may not be true to what it means to her parent, which reminds me of a story cleverly called The Grain of Rice. And it's a story of a king with 4 daughters. He is going to go on a journey, and before he leaves, he gives them each a grain of rice. And they really don't know what to make of it. But the daughter that interests me the most is the 3rd daughter, because it's a little bit like our daughter here, because he very carefully in the story gives them each a grain of rice before they leave, puts it in the palm of their hand, and the first 2 wonder what to do. The 4th one wonders what to do. But in the story it says, the third daughter looked at that grain of rice in her hand and said, "A grain of rice? My father is going away for 10 years' time and he gives to me a grain of rice. I think he's losing his mind. And not only that, by the time he gets back, he'll have lost his eyesight too. It doesn't matter. He'll never know the difference." And she threw it away. So what do you know about that daughter from what you just saw me do? What do we know about that daughter from just that little moment? She's profligate. Oh, what a great word. But what did you specifically see me do or hear me do that told you that? She doesn't tell you the same things. Yep. But give me a specific. What did you see? What did I do with
You
myself?
took a step back, you stood up, you kind of put your head back, and you were feisty.
There you go. Yep. It's this. You know, and you throw your hip out and it's like this, right? If the others are like this, and then you got this, you know, it's all, let's see, attitude. There you go. Attitude. Exactly. You know, just sort of whatever. That's what you see on a graphic novel. You see the whole body and you know, right? I mean, you told me she's got attitude, she's got this, but I'm saying specifically, if I were a drawing, how would you describe this if I'm like this? Because it tells you a whole bunch, right? And you feel that, you know that. I had an experience of telling this particular story. I worked as a storyteller in the juvenile justice system for a long time, and I was working with young women one day, and I told this particular story, and I told the story of the third daughter, and there were people who said, we know exactly who she is. You know, she's all attitude, she's all arrogance, and she pretty much is sure she knows what she knows. You know, it's just all over her, not a lot of spoken words, mostly in her body, which is a little bit like what we just saw in that panel. It was just complete, and how quickly these listeners just completely interpreted what they saw and heard. And the third daughter, I had this one young girl, I have to stand up, who, she was sitting in a chair, but she might as well have been standing up. And she said, oh, that third daughter, she is all up in your face. She just thinks she's too much. You can tell exactly by what she's wearing. Now, let me ask you, did I tell you what she was wearing? I didn't say a word about what she was wearing, but this girl knew. And so I said, oh, okay, what's she wearing? She said, oh, she's got on jeans that are too tight and they are too low. And she's got a shirt down to here like this. She's got tattoos and she's got jewelry and everything. And I said, oh, do you know girls like that? She said, know them, I am them. And I thought, well, okay, there you go. That's why she absolutely brought herself right directly into that story in a pose. I stood in a single pose and a whole story came true for her, which I think is what we see in the graphic memoir. We see the daughter there in the kitchen with the rice. She thinks she pretty much knows what the value of the rice is, and she may or may not be right, but we can see it quickly, and we can intuit very quickly what she's doing with so few words and just a little bit of action. But that image just hung there in time and space at the beginning of the book and at the beginning of, or midway through this particular story that I was telling. In both cases, in the folktale and in the memoir, it just sort of abides there, an unresolved image of great importance that we don't know yet what it all means. So to go back to the memoir and the image of rice, can we go to the third panel? All right. Oops, we lost it. There we go.
I'm going to start scrolling down really slowly. Let me know if I go
Okay.
too fast.
Yeah, just everybody take a look. It's mid-war. Thank you. And if you can take it back, Kim, so we see the whole page all at once, even if it's not perfectly focused. Okay, there. Okay. So there's a lot that's happening there. You know, this is in the middle of the Vietnam War. They're simply trying to have some dinner. The page before, they were burning books so they wouldn't be found out. And then we have this sequence. There's some color at the top. There's some color at the bottom. In the middle, those panels that are just black and white. Again, information in squares, conversation in the balloons, and right there on the right-hand side in the middle, the soldier with the pot. Look carefully at that pot. Have you seen that before? And have you smelled that rice before? And in the context of that house back in Vietnam, back in her mother's young years, when the soldiers broke in and it was dinner time, what's the atmosphere in that room ago in her mother's life, in the midst of a war? What do we feel in that room emotionally? What does that atmosphere smell like? What does it sound like to have soldiers come into your room? What do you hear if a soldier comes into your building? There's fear, of course, yes.
There's a lot of tension.
Mm-hmm.
Clomping footsteps.
Yep. Heavy boots. People wear sandals. These guys have on boots. Yeah. Can you sense time of day? Temperature? Sarcasm from the soldier. Mm-hmm. It's night. Mm-hmm. Can you smell the rice when he lifts that lid? Just as Kim said about the first panel we looked at, that, you know, she would have figured that someone would smell the rice before she'd lifted the lid. That other soldier says, hey, something smells good. It's the rice. Can you smell the rice? I can sort of smell the rice. But that notion of why the rice, you know, 230 pages ago was important, because at this point in mid-war, getting the rice was very valuable. I am hearing an odd buzz. I don't know if it's me.
Joanne, I missed my reading the first time, and even I missed the sarcasm. How did I do that? Was I reading it too fast, or I don't know.
I don't know that I read it as sarcasm. But I think if someone does, it's completely valid, you know, because we're not told what to think or feel. Maybe that's how we interpret that moment. She's piecing her story together. I'm so glad you said, look at the soldier's eyes, because I have a thought about the eyes in that part too. Maybe it's just me, but I don't know. I assume that the art is to make it look that he's looking at the people in the room. But when I saw that panel, I felt like he was looking at me out from the page in an accusatory fashion or a taunting fashion, or I don't know what kind. It didn't feel very positive, but I felt like he was gazing off of the page. I don't know does anybody else see that, or does it feel like it looks like he's just looking at the people in the room?
No, it feels very much like he's looking at me.
Mhm.
I think it's partly the gun, you know.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Joanne, I think I definitely agree that it feels like there's an accusatory look. I didn't read it as sarcasm, but rather suspicion,
Mhm.
which I took out of the context of the following panels.
Yes. Yeah.
That in this case, white rice at a time of war was very valuable. And there's like a suspicion
Mhm.
of why this family even can afford it.
Mhm. Mhm. And if that soldier feels like he's looking at you, the reader, that's breaking the fourth wall. And that's the moment when it's the same as when a storyteller in the oral tradition makes direct eye contact with you. And that's when the story is handed directly to you. And that's when we are invited, that soldier steps off the page a little bit, or we can step into the page a little bit. But that's when all of a sudden there is no intermediary. We're just both present one to another through time. That's something that's often accomplished in oral storytelling, and that I see in this as well.
I see that as replicated in the bottom center.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking directly at us, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
they play off one another.
Mm-hmm. And so when you see them looking right at you, what happens inside you? Something happens that you may or may not have noticed yet. The goal is to become aware of how does that make you feel? How does that make you engage? A lot of us will remember the Vietnam War. What does that do for our memory of that in this moment? How does it affect you? It's a real question. So I'm just going to ask it and see what you say.
With the little girl down on the bottom, it just makes me feel helpless
Yeah.
and hopeless. But with the soldier, I had a different take than some of the others.
Well,
I think he looks hungry
yeah.
and he's wanting to eat it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The most poignant thing in the book was when she talked about the photographer, I guess, who won the Pulitzer Prize.
Yes.
And when he shot the guy's brains out, and he regrets that picture to this day. And I go, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
that really brought it all home to me.
Yes. Yeah. That's when that direct connection between what's on the page, the story being told, is brought into your life and into your experience. And there's a great similarity with the immediacy of the kind of telling with the oral tradition and the graphic novel, graphic memoir tradition. They break that fourth wall very, very quickly so that, in that panel right there with the rice, it's as if it's your rice, either to give or to take from that soldier. So that struck me of the eye contact, and I think there's another way that in this particular book, she breaks the fourth wall and kind of does something similar to making eye contact. Well, let me go back. Let's go back before we get to the last panel. Let's go back to gallery view. I'm thinking about the end of the story of the grain of rice, where I was telling you about the daughters. The point of that story is the king is trying to decide which of his 4 daughters will rule his country when he has gone for good. So the rice was a test. And in the hope that someday I'll tell you the whole story in person, I won't give away all the details. But not surprisingly, if you've ever heard a folktale, it is the 4th daughter that is chosen because she has made the best choice. And in the end of the story, he says, you are the one who will rule my kingdom when I am gone for good, for you will rule wisely and you will rule well. And she did. And it's that moment when the storyteller breaks out of the story and looks right at you and says, and she did. That you are invited to consider, well, let's see, what would I do with my grain of rice? How shall I engage with the kind of choices put before me? So that's that breaking of the fourth wall of bringing you into something and saying, what does it mean right now for me to understand in that folktale or in this book, the value of the parent giving the rice? Do I understand the value? And it calls us to account. It requires a little bit of something of us in that way. Anyway, to say another, I do think there's another way that the book kind of makes eye contact with us, so to speak. And so let's go to the last panel number 4 there, which happens to be the last page of the book. Here we go. That's the last page of the book. And it's scanned, so it's got a white border around it. But in the book, that border is not there. This is a panel that's kind of not a panel. It's an open image that seems to exceed the page. If you notice, there's a going out in the same direction in which he would have been born on the first page. But this has a certain sort of a freedom to it. And part of it is that the words are not boxed in. They are not in a bubble. They're not in a balloon. It has a sort of openness, and it has no frame. The shadow you see around the edges from the scan, not from the drawing. It has no frame. It has no edge. And that to me is a little bit like the forward-lookingness of a teller giving you eye contact, saying, this is happening now, and you are part of this that is happening to you. So I just wonder, most specifically, let me ask you to consider this. Besides the words, never mind the words, can you hear the page? There's a young boy swimming underwater, blowing bubbles. For me, I can hear stuff. What do you hear when you see a young boy swimming underwater, blowing bubbles? And what do you know about that water? Which may or may not be the water she's actually drawing. But what are you pretty sure that you already know about that water? You can hear his heartbeat. Oh, how lovely. It's dirty water. Okay. It's cool and refreshing water. See, everything, all answers are right answers. Is it moving water? Can anybody hear the bubbles? I hear the bubbles. And again, there's that smudge of color. I am just curious what that smudge of color means to anybody. I don't really have a, yes, bubble, not moving. Yeah. Seems like it's still water. Sunlight coming through the water. Yeah, you can see the pattern of the sunlight on his body. Is it a happy picture? Hopeful. Yeah, there's openness in it. There's very, very much openness in it. He's swimming freely. It's optimistic, lovely, yes. Unlike other parts in the book, he's not trying to escape. He's just swimming. He's just swimming. And again, I look at that smudge of color And it just looks just slightest bit like, yes, looking forward, like he's swimming away from there's sort of that long shape that she has used in the background time and time again to kind of be the shape of Vietnam. It's not the shape of Vietnam, but it feels like it's washing away that image to me a little bit. The rest of the book is so loud to me and it's dampened because it's underwater. He's yet to grow into his feet. What a lovely comment. We all know how that is. Yeah. We can come back to the gallery view because we're just about at time. I love that last page because it's not bordered. It has just those few words, and it pulls us out. We started at the beginning with something that was constricted, that if you were telling it, you would feel like this, but even your words and the ways you were responding and the kind of things that you were noticing that just come to you, you can feel and you can hear, and you can almost, well, if it's dirty water, you taste it one way. If it's cool and refreshing, you taste it another, but that water is there, and that hopefulness and that forward lookingness that she's hoping for is there. And, you know, I guess if I was going to tell that last page, I would kind of be the teller that would be looking off into the distance of where he's swimming, you know, kind of looking into that space and saying, you know, I see a new life bound with mine quite by coincidence. And then I would want to break that fourth wall again, which is what I think that last panel does. And I think I would want to turn and see you eye to eye and say, and I think maybe he can be free. And then that story is our story, and we're all in that moment of finding that freedom together, which is what happens in oral storytelling together when that fourth wall breaks and you're brought in to step into the story into you, and all of the imagination which you have brought to the story becomes conscious more and more over time. And I think she's very brave to tell a memoir this way, because we can bring a lot to the story, right or wrong, that may or may not be what was true for her or what she's trying to find. But I think it's important to be aware of how we hear a story, how we engage with something when someone is daring to give us image and idea and inviting our imagination and participation, because it's a little bit like a cautionary tale to say to us that we are all actually folk tales or graphic memoirs in the telling, because the truth is we present to the world a few words, some images, some gesture, some physical presence, the way we embody space and time in relation to one another. And we are all subject to the interpretation of other people, of what those gestures and words and presences and postures may mean to other people. And we piece ourselves together, we piece the understanding of one another together. But I think what's valuable about it is that in the tradition of storytelling, the point of telling a story is to share it with other people, to open curiosity, and curiosity leads to conversation, and conversation leads to community, and community leads to caring one for another, and that the goal and what happens and what's good and future possibility starts to come to place is something that we do together. And I think in the oral tradition, and certainly in this beautiful graphic memoir, she has set us up for a situation just like right now, where we find it something we need to work our way through together. And I think there's great hope in that. And I'll stop there and say thank you.
Thank you so much, Joanne.
You are very welcome.
That was beautiful. I feel we should all be clapping. So
That's okay.
it was very lovely. Thank you so much. And
Thank you, Charlie.
When Joanne, remind me, is this one of your first graphic novels that you've read, or have you?
Yes, yes. I have to say it's not something, it's not, well, I've read Mouse and I've read, oh, darn it, the Palestinian one. I've just,
Persepolis.
yes, thank you, Persepolis. But a long time passed, you know, and not with the intention of having to really pay attention, just sort of like, oh, what happened? So this was a very different experience. for me,
Yes,
yeah.
I find that for a lot of our community members who are picking up the best we could do from the library, that this is their first experience as well.
Mhm.
And it's just been such a pleasure to hear everyone's thoughts and their impressions of this genre being their first experience. It's sort of
Mhm.
like when I taught my little sister how to ride a bike for the first time
Yeah.
and just experiencing that joy. And so thank you so much for sharing your impressions and just your really deep thoughts about the parallels between graphic memoirs and oral storytelling.
Well, it was an interesting undertaking to, you know, to find those connections, because I noticed, because of my background in storytelling, I noticed that I'm aware that I do that quickly. When I see something, I will bring the five senses to it. And I thought maybe that would be worth pointing out so that we can be aware of how quickly we interpret and one another, and that might be something worth taking on. But it is a remarkable way to tell a memoir, and it's an amazing story to be told. And I'm so glad to hear that you will be having her come and speak with you all from the library as well. That is wonderful. So thank you for giving me my chance to share.
Yes, thank you, Joanne. Before we go, I just wanted, Joanne, that was a lovely segue into additional programs from the Big Read. Joanne, you mentioned that we are having the author herself come to talk to us virtually. Actually, I am very, very excited to have Thi Bui come to speak to us. This program is virtual and it'll be Tuesday, April 5th at 6:30 p.m. And I don't know how many people know this. I've told a handful of people, but we are also having a special guest, her friend who is featured at the beginning of this book, and Pulitzer Prize winning author, Viet Thanh Nguyen, who wrote The Sympathizer. He will be stopping by to have a conversation with Thi. We heard a little bit about his hair at the little prologue section of the best we could do, but perhaps, you know, we could hear more conversation between the both of them. And so I'm very excited about that. And then I just wanted to highlight one more program. I'm going to share my screen. A program I'm very excited about. It's a collaboration with the Historical Society and the Hopewell Museum. It's Sunday, March 20th at 3 p.m. via Zoom, and it is a discussion panel on immigration experiences in Hopewell Valley, which I think is a first for the Hopewell Historical Society and the Hopewell Museum. But we have a great panel, and I'm very humbled because I was asked to be on this panel as well. And as I joked to one of our library volunteers, given the credentials of all of these speakers, these panelists, I am just very thrilled to just add my personality to the mix. So our facilitator will be Ian Burrow. He's an archaeologist and also part of the Hopewell Valley Historical Society. We have Dr. David Angwenyi, who is an educator at Hopewell Valley Central High School. And I'm going to go through really quickly. That is me. And Ellen Ito, who's the executive director of Seeds to Sow. Michaela Levins, Director of Stakeholder Relations, Equal Justice USA. And then we have Hopewell Township Committee member, Uma Parandar. And lastly, author and poet, Colby Cedar Smith. And we've had a rehearsal the other day, and I can assure you that our problem will be trying to keep under the hour-and-a-half time limit. But please join us, because we will be just really delving into this topic and all of our experiences. And we have varied experiences, and so it'll be a lot of fun. And you know, Joanne, this format's very different for the library, with just a group of panelists and everyone else as attendees, but it will really inform the panel discussion on March 20th, because it'll be a similar situation where we'll have a group of panelists, a facilitator, and then the rest of you can join us as attendees. So,
Yes, I think it works. I think it works very well. And I wanted to say, and I meant to say this before, to thank you, Kim, for your expertise and your welcome and your kindness and assistance in making all of this work so smoothly. From my perspective, I think you are a wonderful librarian for the Pennington Public Library, and you make this to be a really good experience to be part of. So thank you for your own personal expertise in all of this. I appreciate it.
oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, everyone, I hope you have a wonderful evening. I don't know about you, but I think I'm going to make myself some rice. So, so until the next time on Zoom, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.